Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and this is the Nitro deck by Cracked. I checked. That's how they say it. This is a device that you slip your Nintendo Switch into, and it provides control. I probably don't need to spell that out, but it has a few concerns, unfortunately, and it may not actually be all it's cracked up to be. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. So, what are the claims of this thing? Well, of course, it is something that is designed to essentially replace your Joy-Con with your Switch and make it more ergonomic, more comfortable, bigger sticks, and more importantly, Hall effect sticks. Yeah, if you don't know what that is, it's magnets, baby. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but for now, what is it just like to use this thing? At the end of the day, that's all anyone cares about. On the front, you've got all the face buttons you'd expect to see. On the top, you've got 2 triggers and 2 bumpers. It's basically what you would expect, everything a Joy-Con has, but around the back, there's a little bit more. You've got 4 paddle sort of back-style buttons that you can program to be any button you flipping like, which is a feature that personally I have absolutely no use for and don't care for, but I'm well aware that that is a flipping good time. You know, it's an option. You can disable them if you like, which I did, and it was kind of more complicated than it should have been. The deck comes with some instructions. I will at some point call it a doc. I apologize now. And the instructions give you details on how to disable the back buttons. But the instructions don't work. I had to go online and look at the support page where there are different instructions that actually worked. If you're going to provide printed instructions, they should probably be accurate. Minor complaint aside, what is it like to actually use? Well, without the Switch in there, it does feel strangely light. Like it has a sort of a... And I don't wish to be rude, it sort of feels a bit light and cheap. But there's a flipping good reason for that. But then once that Switch is in, it feels about perfect. It feels too light without it in there, but that's because you've got to balance weight for when the Switch is in there. If you make it heavy and feel substantial when the Switch isn't in there, then it becomes too heavy when the Switch is in there. You know, it's a trade-off. It makes sense. It feels a little bit cheap at first, but then once everything's in place, the weight's perfect. You don't want to be lugging around a great big chunky monkey after all. But how does the Switch stay in the dock? Well, it's quite simple and frankly pretty flipping ingenious. And if other similar products have done this before, I certainly haven't noticed. Inside the Nitro deck are 2 sprung little plastic clips that will slip in very neatly to the rails on the side of the Switch, and then when they go all the way down, you may have already heard it. Do you hear that? And now it won't come out. The only way to get it out is to use this latch on the back here, and this works really well with the OLED and with the standard not OLED. Obviously, it doesn't work with the light. Don't put that in there. It won't fit. It doesn't rattle, it's never going to come out of its own volition, and when it comes to actually removing it, it's largely painless. It's a tiny bit stiff, but really, it's better that it's secure, you know? Top marks. What's slightly less top marks is the kickstand. At first glance, you sort of think, okay, that looks fine, but it's weirdly short in order to make room for the latch that gets the Switch out. And the result is a kickstand that works and is better than like the stock original Switch kickstand. Not as good as the OLED, but frankly, that was already quite a low bar to overcome, and the fact that you have very few usable angles due to its weirdly short length means it's just not that useful. What's more, and this is really a very minor complaint again, but it is disappointing, the hinge that holds the kickstand in place hides a final screw. You can remove all the other screws, but you can't disassemble this in any way that I have found thus far. Maybe there's a way to remove the kickstand, but I haven't found it. Again, a very minor complaint, but it does mean if something does go wrong, your options when it comes to repair are extremely limited. Very disappointing. But despite all that, when it comes to actually playing games, it's pretty flippin' excellent, and I've really enjoyed using it. You know, the buttons are all nice and responsive. The shoulder buttons are a little bit clicky for my tastes, but it's minor, you know? And I've got to say, the full-size analog sticks are a breath of fresh air after using Joy-Con for so long. Or at least the left one is. Not to interrupt the video too much, but before we go any further, we would just like to say that Hookshot Media, that's Nintendo Life's parent company, has teamed up with the wonderful Lost in Cult to produce the Console Chronicles, a book of outstanding proportions because it's basically a handheld history, but for home consoles. And you know a handheld history is good because I'm in it. And I'm gonna be in this one. Pre-orders are available right now. Make sure you check the link in the description to find out more. Thank you. Unfortunately, and it may not be immediately obvious, the right stick is in a really, really baffling location. It's just too far to the right, and it's too far down. It's just an awful location, and it really pains me to say that. When I've got my thumb resting on the face buttons, it's sort of uncomfortably close to the right stick. It just about clears it, enough so that I'm not going to do any misinputs or anything like that. But it's sort of weirdly close, you know. But the real problem arises when you try and use the right stick. Any game that requires constant use of the right stick is just incredibly uncomfortable to play. Like, incredibly uncomfortable. It's almost baffling just how poorly placed the right stick is. I find myself having to use all sorts of weird and wonderful angles in order to get enough purchase on the stick and not actually lose access to the face buttons as well. Because I have tried moving my hand further down and controlling it more like that, but then I can just about reach the X button. And the thing is that there is more than enough real estate here for this not to be precisely here. You know, this is quite a wide unit. This is quite a wide handle. You could easily get at least a few millimeters over to the left. But, I mean, you would lose symmetry, but at the end of the day, hands aren't symmetrical. Any other controller, Joy-Con accepted, have the right stick offset because that's the way that human hands work. And when it's just directly below like this, it just doesn't work. The Joy-Con just about get away with it, but here, there's no excuse. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just my hands causing this issue, so I gave this to other friends and family in order to try it out, and they all agreed it is, at the very best, uncomfortable, and at worst, unusable. When I say I would genuinely rather use just two standard Joy-Con to play any shooter over this, that should really make my point clear enough. And whilst we're on the subject of sticks, I did say I'd talk a little bit more about Hall effect sensors. Again, they use magnets, they should fix drift, so they're a good thing to include. They are more expensive, I'm sure. I don't actually know. And so it's a big claim to say that your controller has them. And so I wanted to devise a test to make sure, because at the end of the day, we never really get to see underneath, and with that final screw being blocked, I wanted to make sure that we were actually looking at Hall effect sensors here. We are, don't worry, but I'm still going to tell you how I found out. By placing some powerful neodymium magnets, I wouldn't recommend doing this because I don't know what the long-term effects are. You can muck up the signal and you can make the stick think it's moving when it's not. That doesn't work with potentiometer-based controllers, so, yeah, this has got Hall effect sensors in. It's just good to be sure. I do want to point out, I didn't doubt Cracked claims at all about this particular product. I just wanted to be sure, and I wanted to devise a test for other things, because there's a lot of people claiming it, and I'm certain at least some may be telling a little bit of a porky pie. Cracked though? Nah, they're all good. You may have noticed when I've shown the back of this unit that there's also a little something here, a little sort of ridge, and that's not just for show. There are in fact two USB-C ports here. One labeled input, one labeled output. The two amigos. The input one is very straightforward. When the Switch is in the Nitro deck, you can simply charge it via the input port. A really simple and obvious thing, but also something that could easily be overlooked. It works perfectly well. Yeah, can't argue. The output port is slightly less obvious. So basically, if you have your Switch docked in a dock, obviously this one's not plugged in, but just for illustrative purposes, using a USB-C to USB-A cable, you can then plug this into your docked Switch and use this as a wired controller, which I don't have a problem with, don't get me wrong. I just think it's weird. I mean, it's a decent enough controller, but to want to use it as a wired solution just feels like a really big stretch. I kind of wonder whether maybe at some point the output port was going to be used for more, maybe so that you could, like, it was like a pass-through, so you could, like, dock it, like with a cable, like a USB-C male to female, or something. But yeah, it's a fine inclusion and all, it's just really weird. We also encountered something, and it actually happened whilst filming, I just didn't really do a good job of, like, talking about it. It's done the thing. I've got it on camera. Occasionally, when the Switch is in the Nitro deck and off, it will just light up. I managed to capture it on film last night when it happened to me. It's staying on this time as well. Yeah. If I press it. Oh, it's gone. I don't think it's of any concern whatsoever. I'm not saying, oh my god, it's gonna drain your battery or anything like that. But it's just, again, it's weird, you know? I don't think it's intentional, and I just felt that it was something worth mentioning, because it happened to me. All in all then, the cracked Nitro deck is a great product in theory, but unfortunately, this right stick really does let it down. There are a few other minor issues that I've mentioned that kind of hold it back a little bit, but nothing enough to stop a recommendation. But this right stick, I can't recommend it with this right stick. It seems like I'm maybe making a mountain out of a molehill, but it really is probably the most uncomfortable right stick I've ever used, just because of its weird positioning. If you generally only play games that very lightly use the right stick or don't use it at all, then I can say that this is actually really comfortable and you could probably look into getting this. But if you ever plan on playing something like Splatoon or Quake or Doom or anything like that, I just can't recommend this. And it kind of breaks my heart because I thought that this was a really neat solution. But sadly, it just spoils it. If you do want to learn more about the Nitro deck, then make sure you check out the link in the description. But as I said, do be cautious. But what do you think? Do you think just me and my friends and family all have weird thumbs? Let us know with a comment down below. And especially if you have used it, let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you make your mouse cursor's dreams come true and make it give that subscribe button a little kiss. And be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.